Welcome to Not Suitable for Democracy. I'm your host, Nick, and on today's episode, we are focusing on the word establishment. Yes, we're jumping right into the online discourse where liberal content creators are going around on TikTok and Instagram promoting the idea that when Bernie Sanders uses the word establishment, he's actually referring to black people. Now, we believe that is categorically false, and what does it even mean, the word establishment? So, without further ado, let's get into it. But first, make sure to subscribe to Not Suitable for Democracy on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. That way you won't miss out on the latest news or the newest episodes. Now, back to the show. Okay, so how did we get liberal content creators getting us to talk about the word establishment? Well, first, keep in mind that the way we talk about language, right, it really depends on, number one, how we define it, two, how that definition can change based on its context, and three, who is the audience that's hearing the word and who is the messenger. So between context, messenger, and audience, these three elements will make this word establishment kind of evolve and change its meaning with slight nuances according to the group and according to the audience. So keep that in mind. So liberal content creators were promoting this idea that when Bernie Sanders says the establishment, he means black people. Now, part of what created this event to become a thing was the fact that these liberal content creators were using very charged language, and they were adamant as if they knew Bernie Sanders was, A, that they knew him personally, but B, that they knew this is exactly in the context and how he was using it. So there was no mistaking that they were very sure of themselves. But the key here is that we know that Bernie Sanders critiques the establishment in a negative light. So if we know that by the transitive property, Bernie talking about the establishment negatively, and the content creators are saying, we know he's referring to black people in a negative light, the way that message was communicated online makes the implication that Bernie Sanders meant a word far worse for black people. Now, that was never said verbatim from these liberal content creators, but they fail to understand that's the implication of their words. Words have power, and especially when these liberal content creators have hundreds of thousands of people following them. So this whole idea that if liberals are going to just take their word for it and just, understand that, Bernie is talking about black people in a negative way, that's not good for our democracy. So in the aftermath, we saw how, progressives, leftists, this spread like wildfire. And, we're talking about it today because we need to set the record straight. How do we define the word establishment? So first, the basic definition of the word establishment refers to a business, an institution, an organization with the physical place. So, for example, here in New York, right, if I were to say, we are interested in a famous establishment for books, that definition would lead me to conclude, the New York Public Library, because that is an institution and it's an establishment for books. So in that sense, we're talking about the physical place, the New York Public Library. But in politics, the word establishment is a little more abstract. It's theoretical, and it's rooted in the economic, social, and political power structures that define a governing body. So if the establishment are these power structures, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are to the left, to the right. It's really just any power structure. And that also determines how the governing body functions. So that could refer to a branch of government, executive, judicial, or legislative. It could refer to all three. It could also refer to a political party, Democrat or Republican, or independent, third party, or all of them. So while it's not necessarily clear or specific on what the establishment is, so what are some more concrete examples of the word establishment? Well, first, bringing it back to Bernie Sanders, he has consistently shown us what he means by the word establishment. Ever since he first ran for public office in Burlington, Vermont, becoming their mayor back in the 1980s. Now, he is a self-described democratic socialist, as am I. And the key here is that Bernie Sanders makes the critique that the American capitalist economic system is not working for everyone. And that is true because we see that, number one, there is a consolidation of wealth. The ultra wealthy, millionaires and billionaires, hoard a lot of the wealth, and this has created a huge disparity in our economic power system. Number two, we also see the corporate consolidation of wealth, where corporations not only keep buying up smaller businesses to become larger and more powerful, but as they consolidate and hoard more wealth, they are also doing it at the expense of their workers. And the workers are the ones actually producing the labor that provide the value that make the corporation so valuable and powerful. So when Bernie Sanders critiques the establishment, he's referring to not only our economic system, but he also is referring to those who enable it. So another example from Bernie Sanders, when he advocates for Medicare for all, it is a single-payer healthcare system where the government would be the primary source that would pay for healthcare for every American citizen. Now, the reason why Bernie is advocating for it based on his critique of the establishment is because the healthcare executives, Big Pharma, all of these corporate powerful entities that are enabling and protecting the system are prioritizing profit over people. And we see that so clearly in the healthcare system, where they've made prices for life-saving drugs so unaffordable that people either A, go into medical debt, or B, pass away. So these are the options. If our system is set up to generate profit over saving lives, then why are we still enabling it? That is a strong critique of the establishment who enable our for-profit healthcare system. And again, Bernie, when he talks about Medicare for all, he doesn't talk about specific people. He talks about the lives potentially lost, but it's never about a specific person, especially in this case, not about black voters. Now, when Bernie does talk about the Democratic establishment and key figures, right, he may critique or pressure people like Chuck Schumer, the minority leader in the Senate, or Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader in the House of Representatives, both Democrats. But they too are responsible for enabling a lot of these corrupt systems. And to be frank, a lot of our elected officials on both sides of the aisle accept a lot of corporate PAC money, lobbyist donations, and accept super PAC funding that empower and embolden their campaigns, giving them the resources to keep running for election year after year after year. Until you have someone like Mitch McConnell, who is, so old and has been in power for so long that he's probably not even alive right now, but he's still in that Senate seat because he hasn't resigned from the seat. So being in power and literally just not even alive, but then able to just still govern, it's so dysfunctional. But that's the system that our government and those elected officials have enabled. And that is the critique that Bernie is focused on. And yes, some of those people may be black. We do have black members in the Senate, in our Congress, and so forth. But it doesn't mean that they are personally responsible. What it does mean is that as their actions are enabling a system, so if you take the person out of it and you focus on the actions, that's what's key here. Most of how the critique of the establishment works, especially from a leftist perspective, most of us frame the conversation through a lens of compassion. How can we save more lives in our healthcare system? Remove the profit motive. That is focused on the action and not the person. So, circling back to the original issue of, Bernie Sanders, according to these liberal content creators, believe that he's referring to black people. Again, doesn't make sense, is not specific about specific black people. But again, it's all about the actions of our elected officials that are enabling these dysfunctional systems.